The morning sunlight poured through the hotel suite's tall windows, warm and soft against Elena Carter's face. She stood in front of the vanity mirror, her reflection framed by ivory lace and silk. The white gown shimmered in the light, beautiful, expensive, and yet, to her, unbearably heavy. Her makeup was flawless, her smile perfectly rehearsed. But her eyes looked like they belonged to someone else. "You look beautiful," her maid of honor, Lila, said as she adjusted the veil. "Like something out of a magazine." Elena forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks, Lila. Just nervous, I guess." "Nervous?" Lila laughed softly. "You and Ethan have been together forever. You're the least dramatic couple I know." "That's kind of the problem," Elena murmured under her breath. Lila didn't hear her. She was already checking her phone, snapping a quick picture of the bride-to-be and posting it with a flurry of emojis. Elena's hands rested on her stomach, unconsciously protective. 8 weeks. That was how far along she was, a secret she hadn't told anyone, not even Ethan yet. She had planned to surprise him on the honeymoon. She had thought he'd be happy. But now, even that certainty felt fragile. The pregnancy hadn't come naturally. Ethan had never wanted to risk passing on his family's genetic condition. So, Elena had turned to a fertility clinic anonymous donor, careful selection, safety and logic above all else. It had been a medical process, not a romantic one. Like everything in her life with Ethan, responsible, calm, emotionless. A knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Her mother entered, already misty-eyed. "My baby," she whispered, clasping Elena's hands. "You're finally getting your happy ending." Elena's throat tightened. She wished she could feel that same joy, but inside she felt like a bird flying into a cage, willingly, gracefully, but still trapped. Down below, she could hear the hum of music and the laughter of guests gathering in the garden courtyard. 150 people all there to witness what looked like a perfect union. Ethan was waiting at the altar, punctual as always, probably checking his watch right now. She could almost picture his calm, polite smile. He was a good man, she reminded herself. Safe. Predictable. The kind of man who would never hurt her, but who would also never make her heart race. "Ready?" her mother asked. "No, yes," Elena said softly. The music started. She stepped out into the hall, her heart pounding harder with every step. The staircase curved elegantly down toward the open doors leading to the garden. Cameras flashed. Guests turned. Everything looked perfect, sunlight, flowers, polished smiles. Ethan's eyes met hers across the aisle. He looked proud, composed, and distant. As Elena began walking, her veil shimmered in the breeze. Each step felt heavier than the last. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "This isn't love. This is safety." And yet, she kept walking. The officiant began the ceremony. Words blurred together, commitment, forever, trust. She nodded when she was supposed to. Smiled when expected. Then came the words that would change everything. "If anyone objects to this union." A deep, rumbling sound cut through the air. Engines. Loud, close, and fast. The guests turned in confusion. And then 3 black SUVs crashed through the side gate. For a few seconds, the world froze. The hum of conversation vanished, replaced by the screech of tires and screams of panic. The SUVs tore across the manicured lawn, crushing flowerbeds and scattering chairs. Security guards rushed forward but stopped when the doors of the lead vehicle opened. Men stepped out, tall, sharp, dressed in black suits that fit like armor. Their movements were calm, deliberate, and terrifyingly controlled. At their center walked a man who didn't belong in any world Elena knew. He was tall, 6'2", maybe more, with dark hair slicked back, and eyes so black they seemed to absorb the light around him. A faint scar crossed his left eyebrow, the only imperfection on a face that looked carved from stone. He walked through the chaos like it was a red carpet. His gaze locked on her immediately. Not on Ethan, not on the guests, just her. "Elena Carter," he said, his voice deep and accented, Italian maybe. "Step away from him." "What?" Ethan moved in front of her. "Who the hell are you?" The stranger didn't answer him. He just kept walking. His men formed a protective half-circle behind him, scanning the crowd with precision. The hotel security froze, uncertain whether to intervene. Something in this man's presence made even armed men hesitate. Elena's heart hammered painfully. "You've got the wrong person," she managed, her voice shaking. "I don't know you." "You don't," he said simply, "but you are carrying my child." The words hit like a slap. Ethan turned, face pale. What kind of sick joke is this? The stranger reached into his jacket slowly. The guards flinched, but he only pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is not a joke. There was a mistake at the Riverside Fertility Clinic. The insemination used my genetic material. You're pregnant with my heir." Elena stared at him, the ground spinning under her feet. "That's impossible. That's insane." "I wish it were." He nodded toward the garden gate, where a black sedan had stopped on the street beyond. Its tinted windows gleamed like mirrors. "They've been following you," he said. "For weeks. My enemies. They planned to take you during your honeymoon, use you and the child against me." "Enough." Ethan snapped. "You're delusional." "Security." But before anyone could move, a sharp crack echoed through the air, gunfire. Bullets struck the stone pillars, sending shards flying. Guests screamed and dropped to the ground. The stranger moved instantly, pulling Elena toward him, his body shielding hers. "Move," he barked to his men in Italian. They responded like clockwork, forming a wall around them, returning fire with chilling precision. The sedan outside shattered under their bullets. Ethan grabbed at her arm, his voice frantic. "Elena, come here." But she was already being pulled away, half carried, half dragged by the stranger. "Let me go," she gasped. His grip was like iron. "Come with me and live," he said sharply. "Stay here, and everyone you love dies." More gunfire. Screams. Chaos. Her mother was crying somewhere in the crowd. A waiter fell, clutching his shoulder. Ethan ducked behind a table, blood on his hand from a grazing wound. "Decide now," the man snapped. Something inside her broke. Elena stopped fighting. He lifted her effortlessly and carried her toward the waiting SUV. The door slammed, and the vehicle roared forward, leaving behind smoke, sirens, and the ruins of what had been her perfect wedding. She sat shaking, clutching the seat belt with trembling fingers. Through the tinted windows, she saw the garden dissolve into chaos, Ethan yelling, guests fleeing, police running toward the hotel. The stranger sat beside her, calm again, checking the phone in his blood-stained hand. "Who are you?" she whispered. He turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes. "Matteo De Luca," he said. "And until this is over, you belong to me." Elena stared at him, unable to speak. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "This can't be real," she whispered, half to herself. "It's very real," Matteo replied. "And if you want to stay alive, you'll listen carefully." The SUV sped through the streets, weaving through traffic like a shadow. Minutes passed in tense silence until they left the city and turned onto a narrow private road flanked by tall trees. Finally, the car slowed before massive iron gates that opened automatically. Behind them stood a stone mansion, cold and imposing, with lights glowing from within. Matteo stepped out first, barking orders in Italian. His men spread out, securing the area. Then he opened her door, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to your new home, Dottoressa Carter." She didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere with you." He sighed, a sound that carried both exhaustion and certainty. "You don't have a choice." Two guards flanked her, but Matteo didn't touch her again. He simply gestured toward the entrance. "You're safe here. For now." Inside, the mansion was breathtaking, polished marble floors, chandeliers, the faint scent of cedar and smoke. But beneath the beauty, there was something colder, controlled. A woman with silver hair met them in the hallway, her expression calm. "This way, Signore De Luca. Her room is prepared." Elena spun toward him. "Room? You can't seriously think you can keep me here. I have a life. My mother, my job." Matteo's eyes darkened. "Your life ended the moment they switched those samples. If I hadn't taken you today, you'd already be dead." "That's insane." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You think I want this? I didn't ask for a child. But now that one exists, my blood, my name, I will protect it. And you? I don't want your protection, she said, her voice breaking. His gaze softened for just a second. You may not want it, he said quietly, but you need it. The woman, apparently some kind of housekeeper, gestured again, more gently this time. Come, dear. You need rest. There's food, clothes, everything you require. Elena looked between the two of them. Then, slowly, she followed, her legs unsteady beneath her. When the door closed behind her and the lock clicked softly into place, she pressed her hands to her stomach, fighting to breathe. 8 weeks pregnant. Hunted by killers. Kidnapped by a man who claimed to be the father. The world she knew, the safe, quiet life she'd built, was gone. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the mansion walls, enemies she didn't understand were waiting. Matero stood in the hallway outside her door long after she was gone, the weight of everything pressing against him. He'd seen a lot of chaos in his life, wars between families, betrayals, blood on marble floors, but nothing unsettled him like the look in her eyes. Fear. Defiance. Innocence. The kind of innocence he hadn't seen in years. He exhaled slowly, glancing at his lieutenant. Double the guards. No one gets near her without my order. Yes, boss. And find out how deep the clinic breach goes. I want names. Doctors, investors, anyone tied to the switch. He turned toward the closed door once more. They won't touch her, he murmured. Not while I'm alive. Inside, Elena sat alone on the bed, staring out the window at the high stone walls surrounding the estate. The air outside was calm again, no gunfire, no sirens, but the silence didn't bring peace. It brought realization. She wasn't a bride anymore. She was a prisoner. And the man who had destroyed her wedding might be the only one who could keep her alive. The next morning came too soon. Elena woke to the sound of distant voices speaking in Italian. For a second, she forgot where she was until the ornate ceiling and heavy velvet curtains reminded her. She wasn't in her apartment. Not in her honeymoon suite. She was in his mansion. The events of the wedding crashed back all at once, the roar of engines, the gunfire, the chaos, the stranger's arms around her. Matero De Luca. She sat up quickly. The room was beautiful, cream walls, carved wood, sunlight spilling across the floor, but it felt wrong. There was no freedom here. The door was locked, just as it had been last night. A tray of food sat on the table. Toast. Fruit. Coffee that had gone cold. A quiet knock startled her. Come in, she said sharply, expecting him. Instead, the older woman from before entered. Good morning, miss. I'm Signora Russo. Mr. De Luca asked me to see to your needs. My needs. Elena's voice was brittle. I don't need anything except to go home. Russo hesitated, pity flickering in her eyes. It's not safe yet. Please eat something. The doctor will come later to check on you. I don't need a doctor, Elena snapped. I need answers. The woman gave a small nod, understanding the futility of arguing. Mr. De Luca will explain everything himself. He's in the study. When you're ready. When the door closed, Elena sat for a long moment, staring at the untouched breakfast. Every instinct screamed at her to escape, but the mansion's windows were locked, and the walls outside looked tall enough to keep even light from getting through. She changed into the clothes left in the wardrobe: jeans, a soft sweater, and flats that fit perfectly. Too perfectly. Someone had studied her size, her habits, even her style. That thought chilled her. By the time she found the courage to open the door, a silent guard was waiting outside. He gestured politely for her to follow. The hallways were long and grand, lined with old paintings and thick carpets that muffled every footstep. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and clean polish. They stopped before tall double doors. The guard knocked once, then stepped aside. Enter, came a voice she already knew. Elena's pulse jumped. She pushed open the doors. Matero was behind a wide mahogany desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a faint bandage around his forearm. He looked up from a file, and for a second, the morning light softened his sharp features. He gestured to the chair opposite. Sit, Dr. Carter. I'll stand. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. Stubborn. I expected that. She folded her arms. You owe me an explanation. All of it. He nodded, rising to his feet. You deserve one. He crossed to a table stacked with folders and photos, sliding one toward her. Inside were medical forms, her clinic's letterhead, her name, and lab results she recognized. Her heart clenched. These are your records from the Riverside Fertility Clinic, he said evenly. 6 months ago, you underwent insemination with what you believed was anonymous donor material. She glared at him. I know what I did. Then you should also know this. He opened another file and handed her a document with his own name at the top, genetic storage authorization. 3 years ago, I froze my genetic material before a high-risk operation. The clinic director, Dr. Arben Krasnov, is tied to my enemies. They accessed my files. They used them. Elena felt dizzy. You're saying they switched the samples? On purpose? Yes. She shook her head. That's impossible. Illegal. Clinics don't make mistakes like that. Not mistakes, he said quietly. Manipulations. He laid out more photos, security footage showing a man entering the clinic late at night, leaving with a box of samples. That man is Krasnov's cousin. They saw an opportunity to create leverage against me, a child carrying my bloodline. You were just a name on a list. Elena's stomach turned. So they used me. They used both of us, Mateo said. And that's why you're in danger. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. When my enemies discovered you were pregnant, they planned to kidnap you during your honeymoon. They would have used you and the child to force my surrender. And what exactly are you? She asked, her voice low. A criminal? A gangster? He looked over his shoulder. Yes. He said it without shame, without hesitation. Her throat went dry. And I'm supposed to believe you're the hero here? His eyes darkened. No, Dr. I am not the hero. I am simply the only one who can keep you alive. Silence stretched between them. Elena looked down at the papers again, the DNA test showing 99.9% paternity match. Her stomach twisted. I can't believe this, she whispered. I can't. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You don't have to believe it. Just stay alive long enough for me to prove it. I want to go home. You can't. I will, she snapped. You can't keep me here forever. He studied her, unblinking. No. Not forever. But until the threat is gone, you will stay under my protection. You and the child. He said the child like it was something sacred. Elena's hands trembled as she pushed the papers away. This is insane. You destroyed my wedding, terrified my family. I saved your life. She laughed bitterly. You're unbelievable. Mateo's jaw tightened, but when he spoke again, his voice was calm. You don't have to trust me. Just don't fight me. Fighting will only get you killed. I hate you, she whispered. I know, he said softly. He didn't move as she stormed out, the guard stepping aside silently. But when the door closed, Mateo leaned against the desk, eyes on the papers she'd left scattered. He had faced betrayal, torture, and death, but her hatred cut deeper than any of it. The next few days blurred together. Elena refused to eat at first, refused to speak, refused to even look at Mateo when he appeared at mealtimes. He never raised his voice or forced her. He simply left food, gave space, and waited. The house became a cage. Guards at every door, cameras discreetly tucked into corners. Every time she tried a window, it was sealed. Every phone line disconnected. Once, she tried to slip past a guard at night. She made it to the garden before a figure stepped from the shadows. Going somewhere, Signorina? It was Mateo's voice. She froze. You can't keep me locked up. He approached slowly, unarmed, hands at his sides. You can't outrun a war. I don't care about your war, she cried. I just want my life back. He stopped a few feet away. The moment you walked into that clinic, your life stopped belonging to you. His tone wasn't cruel, it was tired. Heavy with truth she didn't want to accept. You think you can control everything, she said bitterly. Even me. His gaze softened. I can't control you, Elena. I can only protect you. For the first time, he used her name. She turned away, swallowing hard. I don't need your protection. You do, he murmured, almost to himself. Even if you hate me for it. He let her go back inside without another word. That night, she dreamed of the wedding, but this time, when the gunfire started, Matteo wasn't there. She woke up shaking. The following morning, she found courage again and questions. She knocked on the study door and entered without waiting. Matteo looked up, surprise flickering across his face. You're awake early. I didn't sleep. He set down his pen. I can imagine. Elena crossed her arms. You said there was proof the clinic was working with your enemies. I want to see everything. A faint smile touched his lips. Now you believe me? I didn't say that, she snapped. I just want the truth. He motioned her closer and pulled up a digital file. Here. Security logs. Financial records. Transcripts. As she scanned the evidence, her scientific mind kicked in. The data was too detailed to be fake. Payments from shell companies tied to Eastern European accounts. Patient files accessed illegally. Why me? She asked quietly. He met her eyes. Because you were perfect. No family ties to organized crime. Stable career. No reason to suspect foul play. So they used me as camouflage. Yes. She exhaled shakily. They didn't just ruin my life. They made me part of something I don't even understand. You understand more than you think, Matteo said. You're intelligent, careful, strong. That's why you're still alive. Elena stared at him. You talk like you know me. I've read your file, he said simply. Every patient the clinic touched became a potential threat. I had to know who you were. Her stomach turned again. You had me investigated. I had to be sure you weren't part of their trap. And now, she demanded. What am I now? He hesitated. Now you're under my protection. And whether you like it or not, that makes you part of my world. She wanted to scream at him. Instead, she whispered, you've destroyed everything. Matteo looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. No, he said softly. They did. I'm just the one trying to fix it. That evening, a storm rolled in, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. Elena sat by the window, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. There was a knock. May I? Matteo stepped inside before she could answer. He carried a steaming mug of tea. You haven't eaten all day. I'm not hungry. You're pregnant. You need to eat. She glared at him. Don't pretend to care. I don't pretend about anything. He set the tea down beside her. I know this is impossible for you. But pretending the danger isn't real won't make it disappear. Elena's voice trembled. Do you ever regret it? The life you chose? He stared out the window for a moment. Every day. But regret doesn't change who you are. Only what you do next. Silence settled between them, broken only by the rain. Finally, Elena said quietly, you ruined my wedding. Yes. You terrified my mother. Yes. You kidnapped me. He nodded once. And I would do it again. Her breath caught. Why? He looked at her then, his eyes dark and steady. Because if I hadn't, you'd be dead. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, hard angles, tired eyes, a faint scar she hadn't noticed before. For the first time, she saw not a monster, but a man who carried the weight of too many battles. She turned back to the window. I still hate you. I know, he said quietly. But hate is better than fear. That night, as thunder rolled over the mansion, Elena lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of rain on the roof. Somewhere in the hall, footsteps passed, guards changing shifts, no doubt. She closed her eyes and pressed a hand to her stomach. What are we doing? She whispered to the life growing inside her. Somewhere down the corridor, behind closed doors, Matteo De Luca sat alone in his study. The light from his desk lamp caught on a photo, a grainy image of a tiny shape inside a womb. The ultrasound. He had memorized it already, but still he stared, as if the fragile heartbeat in that picture could make sense of the chaos around them. "Stay alive," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "Both of you." Outside, the storm raged on, but within the walls of that mansion, something was beginning to shift. Not peace, not forgiveness, but the faintest spark of understanding. And in the darkness, neither of them realized that this fragile truce would soon be tested by fire. The morning sun crept across Elena's face as she woke to the faint hum of quiet activity outside her locked door. The events of the past few days still felt unreal, like fragments of a fever dream, yet every breath reminded her it was all true. The kidnapping, the mansion, the man who claimed to be her child's father. She sat up slowly. For the first time, she noticed her clothes folded neatly on the dresser, laundered. Someone had been in her room while she slept. That thought made her stomach twist. Then came the knock. Elena, Matero's voice, calm but firm, through the door. "We need to talk." She hesitated. "I'm not dressed. I'll wait." "Don't you always," she muttered, rising and pulling on a loose sweater. When she finally opened the door, Mateo stood there in dark slacks and a charcoal shirt. No tie, sleeves rolled up, that same quiet confidence radiating from him like heat. He looked her over once, not in a way that made her feel small, but like a man checking for injuries after battle. "You didn't eat dinner last night. You keeping tabs on my meals now too?" His brow lifted slightly. "You're carrying my child. I'm keeping tabs on its health." Her glare could have burned glass. "You don't own me." "No," he said simply. "But until this is over, I'm responsible for you." They walked to the library together, the air thick with tension. When they entered, the large windows filled the room with gold morning light, illuminating the chaos of maps and folders spread across his desk. She could see photographs, men, buildings, shipping containers. It looked like a war room. Mateo motioned for her to sit. She didn't. He sighed. "I had my men trace the sedan from the wedding. It belonged to the Krasnov Bratva, an Albanian syndicate. They've been pushing into my territory for months. They learned about your pregnancy through the clinic. They wanted you as leverage. So you're telling me this baby, my baby, is a target in your crime war?" His expression hardened. "Our child." The correction hit like ice water. Elena shook her head. "This is insane. I didn't choose this. Any of it." "Neither did I," Mateo said quietly. "But we deal with the world we have, not the one we want." He pulled a small box from a drawer and set it on the desk. "Open it." Inside was a slim black bracelet with a small metal disc. "What is this?" "A tracker," he said. "Only my men can read the signal. If you run, if something happens, we'll find you before they do." Elena closed the box sharply. "You expect me to wear that like some trained pet?" "I expect you to stay alive," he replied evenly. Her anger flared. "You think you're saving me, but all you've done is lock me in another kind of prison." His voice stayed calm, but his jaw tightened. "You think this is easy for me? I'm risking everything by keeping you here. Every rival I have will try to use you. Every ally will question my judgment." "Then let me go," she said, voice trembling. "I can't." "You won't." He stepped closer, his eyes sharp. "You think you understand power, but you don't. If I let you walk out that door, they'll have you within the day. And when they do, they won't care that you're innocent or pregnant. They'll use you to destroy me." Her hands shook, anger and fear mixing until she couldn't tell them apart. "You could at least admit you like controlling me." For a moment, Mateo looked like he might deny it. But then he said, very quietly, "Maybe I do. Because control is the only thing keeping you alive." The air between them crackled with something dangerous, not just fury, but something hotter, something neither of them wanted to name. Finally, Mateo turned away, breaking the tension. "Breakfast is in the dining room. After that, the doctor will examine you." Elena's voice was soft, almost bitter. "You really have thought of everything." He met her gaze again. "When the stakes are life and death, you have to." That afternoon, the promised doctor arrived, a young woman named Dr. Luciana Rizzi, kind-faced and efficient. She checked Elena's blood pressure, ran a quick scan, and smiled. "Everything looks good." The baby is strong. Elena felt the smallest flicker of relief. So far, so good, she murmured. When Dr. Rizzi left, Matteo lingered by the door. You're healthy. That's all that matters right now. Elena looked at him. You talk about life and death like they're the same thing. He didn't answer, just nodded once and left. That night, as she lay in bed, Elena thought of how his tone had shifted whenever he spoke about the child, almost reverent, like he couldn't decide whether it was salvation or curse. She pressed a hand to her stomach. Who are you? She whispered to the man in the next room, though he couldn't hear her. Outside, rain began to fall, washing the world clean, but nothing inside her felt pure anymore. The following morning, Elena found Matteo waiting in the library again. This time, coffee steamed beside 2 cups. He gestured for her to sit. You look better rested. I'm not. He gave a half smile. You're honest. I respect that. Don't mistake honesty for trust, she said coldly. I don't, Matteo replied. But I do have a proposal. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of proposal? A bargain, he said. You want your freedom. I want your cooperation. Help me end the Krasnov threat, and when it's over, you can leave. No guards, no chains, no debts. Elena frowned. How exactly am I supposed to help you? You were a patient at Riverside for months. You know the building. Its staff. Its systems. I plan to take back what they stole, the files, the evidence. You can help us get inside. Her mouth fell open. You want me to help you rob the clinic? Not rob, he corrected. Reclaim. They've been running an operation for years, switching samples, blackmailing powerful families. I can't go to the police. But with evidence, I can make them destroy each other. Elena stared at him, torn between disbelief and morbid fascination. And you think I'll help you? After you kidnapped me? Matteo leaned forward slightly, his voice low. You want to stop them from doing this to anyone else? Then yes, you'll help me. She looked away. You're manipulating me. I'm giving you purpose, he said softly. That word struck deep. Purpose. It had been months since she'd felt like her choices mattered. She took a slow breath. And if I say no? Then you stay here until it's done. But the danger doesn't end until they're gone. Elena's eyes met his. You're asking me to trust a criminal. He smiled faintly. I'm asking you to trust a man who's trying to protect what's his. There it was again, what's his. She hated the way that made her heart beat faster. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I ask. Later that day, she wandered into the garden, her first time outside without guards crowding every step. The air smelled of roses and damp earth. For a moment, she could almost pretend this was normal life. Until she saw him. Matteo stood near the fountain, phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. His tone was low but edged with steel. She caught fragments, shipment, safe route, no survivors. He ended the call and turned, catching her watching. You shouldn't eavesdrop, he said. You shouldn't talk about killing people in public, she shot back. A faint, dangerous smile touched his mouth. Fair point. She folded her arms. Do you ever stop being in control? He looked at her thoughtfully. Control keeps chaos at bay. Without it, people die. Do you ever think about what that makes you? He stepped closer, eyes on hers. Every day. The air between them tightened again, not hostility this time, but something else. The way he looked at her made her breath catch. I'm not afraid of you, she lied. His gaze flicked down to the hand she unconsciously placed on her stomach. You should be, he murmured. Not because I'll hurt you, but because you're part of my world now. And my world doesn't forgive weakness. Elena swallowed hard. Then maybe it needs someone who does. For a second, something like surprise flashed in his eyes. Then he turned away, a hint of a smile ghosting his lips. You're more dangerous than you realize, Dottoressa. That evening, she found herself pacing the length of her room, Matteo's offer circling her mind. He was a criminal. A manipulator. A man capable of killing without hesitation. And yet, he was the only one who had told her the truth. If she helped him, maybe she could end this nightmare. She pressed a hand to her belly again. It's not just about me anymore, she whispered. Decision made, she stormed back to the library. Mateo looked up as she entered. I'll do it, she said. His brow lifted slightly. Do what? Help you. With the clinic. But I have conditions. A flicker of amusement passed through his eyes. Of course you do. No one innocent gets hurt, she said firmly. No nurses, no staff, no bystanders. You promise me that, or I walk. Mateo studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed. And when it's over, I go free. Yes. She hesitated, unsure why his calm acceptance unsettled her more than his anger ever did. Why do I feel like you always get what you want? He smiled faintly. Because I do. As she turned to leave, he said quietly, Elena. She looked back. You made the right choice. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We'll see. When she was gone, Mateo sat back, exhaling slowly. He had faced enemies with guns, governments with warrants, and traitors with knives. None of them had made him feel as off balance as one stubborn, furious doctor who refused to be broken. Somewhere in the quiet of the library, Mateo whispered to the empty air, You and I are going to burn the world down, Dotteressa Carter. And though he didn't yet know it, she was already learning how to hold the match. Elena had never considered herself a quitter. In vet school she'd stayed up nights memorizing anatomy, in the clinic she'd worked long shifts stitching torn ligaments and calming terrified animals. That stubbornness kept her alive as much as it had made her competent. Here in the mansion it turned into something else, a streak of defiance she refused to dull. The first escape attempt was small and stupid. She waited until the guard shifts changed, slipped into a narrow hallway she'd memorized, and tried the back door she'd seen Mateo and his men use. The door had a heavy lock and a keypad. She thought maybe she could force the mechanism with a hairpin. She'd done worse things to secure animals in emergencies. In the dark, she worked the lock until her fingers ached. A shadow detached itself from the wall. Going for a run? Mateo's voice was flat. She nearly dropped the hairpin. You scared me, she snapped, trying to make her voice hard. I did not come to scare you. He crossed the short distance, hands in his pockets. The place where anger should have been showed only tiredness. You will get yourself killed, Elena. You kidnapped me, she said. Her voice wavered despite herself. So don't tell me what I can and can't do. He knelt to meet her eye level, calm and unhurried. I know. He watched her with an attention that felt too close. But you are pregnant. Running will not free you. It will only place you at even greater risk. You think I don't know that, she shot back. Do you think I like being trapped in your gilded cage? I have a life. I had a life. And you will have one again, he said softly, then steadier. If we finish this. She laughed, a dry, ugly sound. Finish this? You mean your war? My life was collateral. Maybe at the beginning, he admitted. But now it's different. It was the way he said it, not defensive, not pleading, that made something heavy and dangerous move in her chest. Different how? He straightened. You're not collateral anymore. You're something worth saving. She stood, stepping back. Don't romanticize this. Her voice trembled. Don't make it sound noble. He didn't try to make it sound anything. He just looked at her, and the look was so open, so stripped of the armor he usually wore, that she wanted to hit him and hug him both at the same time. A footstep broke the charged silence. The guard, Mateo's youngest, stood at the end of the hall. He gave a curt nod and the man retreated. Mateo straightened, his professional face returning. Go back to your room, he said. Rest. The doctor is coming later and I want you calm. Elena wanted to resist. Instead she turned and walked away, each step full of the heat of unsaid things. She had tried to run and failed. The humiliation tasted bitter not because Mateo had caught her, but because the truth of her vulnerability had revealed itself in the only place she never wanted to be seen. Back in her room she sat at the little desk by the window and stared at the hairpin in her hand. It suddenly felt small and useless. She slid it into a drawer and closed it like she could lock away her desire for freedom. Hours passed. Later, when the afternoon sun slanted through the glass, Mateo knocked and entered without waiting. He brought with him 2 steaming cups of tea and set one on the desk. Up close, she saw a bruise at the side of his temple. A remnant from the wedding day perhaps, or some job that hadn't gone cleanly. Violence clung to him like a shadow. "I told you not to try to run," he said without accusation. "You told me a lot of things," she answered. He sat on the chair opposite, hands folded. "You tried to reclaim control. I understand that impulse. You're a healer, you fix problems by action. But sometimes the fix requires patience." Elena wanted to say that patience had never worked for her before. Instead she asked, softer, "Do you regret taking me? Ever?" He looked away for a second, that pause where armor cracked. "Every day. But regret comes with choice, and this was the only choice that kept you alive." "You talk as if I'm fragile," she said, annoyed. "I've saved animals from worse than you." He smiled at that, a small, genuine flash. "I know. Which is why I don't want to lose you. Not to a bullet. Not to their greed. Not to your own reckless bravery." She swallowed. "So your solution is to lock me up. Until we can make it not necessary," he corrected. "I have men watching for shadows. I have plans. The clinic is a target, and I can't risk you being their bargaining chip." "You always think of yourself as the problem's answer," she said. "Do you know what it's like to wake in a stranger's house and be told your life belongs to someone else?" He kept his gaze steady. "I don't know what that feels like from your side. Only that it is my fault. I will live with that." Her chest hurt at the humility in his voice. She wanted to hate him outright and instead found the sensation of confusion and something like pity. "Tell me what you plan," she said abruptly. "If I'm stuck here, at least tell me the plan." He nodded, and for the first time, opened the door to the war room. She sat on the edge of the big desk while he explained the evidence they'd collected, the names traced to the clinic, the shipping manifests, the men who'd moved samples. He spoke of safe houses, of a legal contact who could use the files once they were in the right hands. The language was tactical, sharp. He softened when he talked about the baby, protective, almost tender. When his voice took that tone, she felt the first, dangerous stirrings of something that had nothing to do with gratitude. "You'll be involved," he said. "Only where I need you. I will not put you in a field operation unless there's no other option." She met his eyes. Words. Then see them as promises. Promises in his world were like contracts in a courtroom, honored when convenient. Yet something in the way he said promise felt sincere. They sat in that charged silence for a long time, the house settling around them. Her rebellion had failed. The only rebellion left was to shape the way this would go. She could fight every step, or she could use her mind. "I'll help," she said finally. "But on my terms." He inclined his head. "Name them." Her list was practical and small: no lethal force if avoidable, no harm to nameless staff, full disclosure of data she might be asked to provide, and a guarantee that when it ended she could leave. He listened, eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he gave a short nod. "Agreed," he said. "I would expect nothing less." It wasn't what she'd wanted at the start. But agreements had a way of shaping futures. She had just traded a key for a different kind of leverage. The thought made her strangely calm. When he left, she pressed her palms to her stomach and felt for the faint flutter that would come much later. For now, there was only the echo of her own breathing and the steady pulse of a house that had both saved and captured her. She would play by her own rules when she could. Elena had vowed she would never be reduced to the role of kept woman, a trophy used to secure favors and handshakes. But people weren't single-purpose items, they bent and adapted. In a house full of polished steel and soft silence, she began to explore the edges of Matteo's world. He said nothing to announce it, it was an unspoken permission. One afternoon, Signora Russo knocked and entered with a basket of clean clothes and a soft tone. "Mr. De Luca thinks it would be good for you to have comfortable things." When the door closed, Elena found herself in front of a mirror with garments laid out that weren't prison gray but rich, deep colors and natural fabrics that fit her well. There was a soft cardigan that made her shoulders feel less like shields and a pair of jeans that actually flattered her. Clothes were a small mercy. She dressed slowly, fingers tracing the fabric. For reasons she couldn't name, The act made her feel less like an object and more like a person who could be noticed without fear. On the way to the library, she passed Matteo in the hall. He stopped her with a look that was more curious than possessive. "You look different," he observed. "You think because I smile I'm happy," she snapped, then softer. "You're the only one who notices things like that." He didn't smile, but there was a softness there. "I notice what matters." She wanted to tell him to stop, to keep distance. Instead she walked on, because there was something dangerous in the way he looked at her that felt like a promise or a warning. Matteo began to ease her into the fabric of his life in small ways. He had a driver pick up veterinary journals and case files for her to review. He set up a secure terminal so she could consult remotely for the zoo and a wildlife rehabilitation center. The work gave her a foothold in reality, a thread she could hold onto when the rest of her life felt like it was happening to someone else. At night, he would sit at the desk and she would read by the lamp. Sometimes they would talk in short, clipped sentences about the next move. Other times, when the tension eased, Matteo would share small facts about his life, the town he'd grown up in, the father he'd lost before he was old enough to understand grief. He never romanticized his actions, he simply answered when she asked. One evening, after a long day plotting clinic infiltration routes, Matteo found her at the window watching the garden. The air was cool, full of the smell of wet roses. He came up behind her and for a moment there was only the sound of rain against leaves. "You used to study birds," he said quietly. She smiled. "Raptors mostly. Hawks. Falcons. They're blunt, honest creatures." He turned his head. And I learned patience from them," she admitted. "The right moment to strike, the right moment to wait." He looked at her then, like he was cataloging a new data point about her. "Patience could be useful here." She looked back. "Patience is not my best quality." Noted. His tone was a dry tease and it warmed her chest like sunlight. They moved through the conversation in easy steps after that, not lovers, not enemies, but two people who had been thrown into a shared script and had slowly started to learn the lines. Elena found that the more she understood Matteo's world, the less monstrous it seemed and the more human. The same pattern of survival rose in all of them. Protect family, keep your people safe, don't let your guard down. One night, an early storm had knocked out power to half the estate. The kitchen staff lit candles and a hush fell over the house. Elena and Matteo ended up in the study with 2 cups of coffee and the soft light from the fireplace. Matteo had removed his jacket, revealing forearms with pale scars that crossed like tributaries. The firelight made him look softer, less like a carved statue and more like a tired man. "You ever think about running away when you were young?" she asked, because sometimes questions loosened closures. He smiled a half smile. "All the time. Until the weight of responsibility learned how to find me." "You don't sound sorry about the responsibilities." He looked at the flames. "I am sorry about what I had to do to survive. I am not sorry for the people I kept alive." He met her eyes. "Even if it required things I'm not proud of." She saw no boast in his voice, only the honest accounting of a man who had made choices and lived with them. The admission made her want to tell him everything about the animals she'd saved, the quiet joy of a healed wing, the ridiculous pride she felt when a stray dog finally learned to trust humans. Instead, she kept the stories private. Sharing pieces of herself was dangerous. Matteo reached out, then hesitated, his hand hovering near hers on the arm of the chair. "May I?" he asked softly. Her breath caught. "May what?" He closed the distance with the gentlest of motions and rested his fingers against the back of her hand. The contact was electric but not sexual, it was grounding. His thumb traced slow circles like someone comforting an anxious animal. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," he said, voice low. "Not tonight. I'm asking you to know that I will do everything I can to keep you safe." She swallowed hard. The walls she'd built were old and high, but a single touch from him found a crack and widened it. Rage and gratitude warred inside her like 2 animals. In the end, she allowed the small comfort. "Don't get used to it," she warned, half smile, half threat. "I don't want you to get used to being protected." He smiled in answer. "I want you to choose it." The invitation hung between them, not demand, not ultimatum, but space for a decision. She wondered if she had the courage to make it. Later, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, she lay awake thinking of silk and steel, the softness of new clothes, the hardness of locks. The world inside the mansion was a lattice of contradictions. Mateo was both a protector and a captor. He was as capable of tenderness as of brutality. She had a choice to make: cling to the life she'd planned and risk being a pawn, or step into the uncertain, dangerous new map of her future and become an active player. She pressed her palm to her belly. Deep inside, something fluttered, small and insistent. It was tiny and unjudging, untouched by her anger or his sins. For the first time since the car had crashed through the garden gate, Elena felt the raw shape of the decision forming inside her like a seed. Outside, under the wide sky, the mansion stood like a fortress. Inside, two people who had started as enemy and captive were beginning, reluctantly and in their own sharp ways, to become something else. Not yet love. Not yet trust. But something leaning towards understanding, pulled taut and fragile like a string waiting to sing. The first real winter storm swept over the coast the night Mateo told her everything. The wind howled against the tall windows of the mansion, rattling them like restless ghosts. The power flickered once, then steadied. Downstairs, the last of the guards were switching shifts. The house fell into the kind of silence that makes every heartbeat sound louder than it should. Elena sat curled on the sofa in the library, her knees tucked beneath a blanket. In front of her, the fire cracked, throwing long shadows across the walls. Mateo was at his desk, reading a report, his expression stone-hard as always. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked finally. Her voice came out smaller than she'd meant. He looked up. "Only when I have a reason to. That must not happen often." He closed the folder, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth. "Not until you showed up." Elena rolled her eyes, but the warmth that crept up her neck betrayed her. "Don't do that." "What?" "Say things like that, like we're friends." He stood and crossed to the fire. "We're not friends," he said. "We're bound by circumstance. That's one way to put kidnapping." "I saved you," he reminded her quietly. "From you." That earned the smallest laugh from him, the kind that didn't sound practiced. "Touché." She studied him for a moment. The firelight softened the hard lines of his face, made him look almost human, almost ordinary. "You really think this is normal? Living like this? Guards, guns, secrets." "It's survival," he said simply. "You grow used to it." Elena tilted her head. "Did you choose it? Or did it choose you?" He hesitated, a rare crack in his armor. "Both. My father ran the family before me. He was a good man in bad circumstances. When he died, I inherited his enemies along with his business." "How old were you?" 21. She frowned. "That's barely an adult." Mateo's voice went quieter. "In my world, adulthood comes the day you bury someone you love." Silence filled the space between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time, she didn't see him as the monster who had ruined her life, just a man carrying too much. Elena turned her gaze back to the fire. "My father died when I was 19, she said after a moment. "Heart attack. It was sudden. I thought I'd never stop being angry at the world after that." He looked at her, curious. "And did you?" "No," she admitted softly. "I just got better at hiding it." Something passed between them then, a shared, unspoken understanding. Outside, the storm howled louder. Mateo moved to pour 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to her. "I don't drink," she said. "You do tonight." She took it, the amber liquid glowing like fire in the light. "So what's the point of this little therapy session?" He leaned against the fireplace, glass in hand. "It's not therapy. It's truth." "Truth?" He nodded. "The only way to survive in my world is to know who you're standing beside. Secrets kill faster than bullets." Elena met his eyes. "And what do you want to know about me?" "Everything," he said. "But start with what matters most." She exhaled. "I became a vet because animals don't lie. People do." "Fair," he said. "Your turn." She blinked. "My turn." He smiled faintly. "If I answer one, you answer one." The game began like that, cautious, slow, like walking barefoot across glass. She asked why he never married. He said because love was a weakness in his world. He asked why she'd agreed to marry Ethan. She said because safety looked a lot like love when you were tired of being disappointed. He asked if she was afraid of him. She said yes. Then, after a long silence, she asked the question that had been gnawing at her since the day of the wedding. If the baby wasn't yours, would you still have saved me? Matteo didn't answer right away. He set his glass down, looking into the fire as though the flames might give him courage. At first, no, he said finally. But after I saw you that day, after I saw how terrified you were and how fast they came for you, it stopped being about blood. You were a person they meant to hurt. I don't let that happen on my watch. Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to stay angry, to keep her walls up, but the sincerity in his voice melted something she'd tried to keep frozen. Thank you, she whispered, surprising even herself. He looked at her, really looked, and something flickered behind his eyes. Don't thank me yet, he said quietly. The war isn't over. When she finally went to bed that night, she lay awake listening to the rain against the windows, the echoes of their confessions circling her mind. Somewhere between the fear and the fury, a strange truth had taken root. She didn't hate him anymore. And that frightened her more than anything. 2 days later, violence shattered the fragile calm. It started with a single sound, a pop, distant but distinct. Gunfire. Elena froze in the middle of the corridor, a tray of tea trembling in her hands. A second shot followed, closer. Then shouting. She barely had time to react before Matteo appeared, gun in hand, his expression all business. Downstairs, he ordered. What's happening? Attack. Move. She dropped the tray and followed him through the hallway. The air smelled of gunpowder. 2 guards sprinted past, shouting in Italian. Another man staggered by with blood on his sleeve. Matteo shoved open a heavy door and pulled her inside a reinforced panic room disguised as a wine cellar. He slammed the door, locking it with a keypad. Her pulse raced. Who's attacking us? Krasnov's men. He grabbed a headset from the wall. Status. A voice crackled through static. Northgate breached. 3 down. We're holding them off. Matteo cursed under his breath. They shouldn't have found us this fast. Elena's hands shook. I thought you said we were safe here. No place is safe forever, he said grimly. A loud explosion rocked the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Elena stumbled, catching herself against the shelf. Matteo reached out instinctively, steadying her. Stay behind me, he said. For what? You think they'll stop because I'm pregnant? His eyes flashed. They'll stop because I'll kill them before they get close. She stared at him, this man who spoke about killing as easily as breathing, and felt both terrified and oddly reassured. Minutes dragged by like hours. Then came silence. Matteo pressed his ear to the door, listening. It's over. Elena swallowed hard. How do you know? Because I've been through worse storms than this. He unlocked the door cautiously, gun still raised. The corridor outside was smoky, walls scorched from small blasts. 2 guards were moving bodies away. Everyone secure? Matteo demanded. Yes, boss, one of them said. They tried to breach the garage. Failed. We lost 2 men. Matteo's jaw tightened. Send word to Luca to relocate the safe routes. We're burned here. As he turned back, Elena caught the faintest wince of pain, a small bloom of red spreading on his sleeve. You're bleeding, she said. It's nothing. It's not nothing. She grabbed his arm. Sit. He resisted, but she gave him a look so fierce he obeyed. She tore a strip from her own sleeve and pressed it against the wound. You need stitches. I've had worse, he muttered. I don't care. Her hands were firm, efficient, the trained precision of a doctor. When she tied off the makeshift bandage, she finally met his eyes. They were softer now, the hardness gone. You risked your life for me, she said quietly. He shook his head. I told you before. I'd do it again. You shouldn't have to. That's where you're wrong, he said. It's my job. Her hand still rested on his arm. Neither of them moved. For a long moment, They just looked at each other, the air heavy with something unspoken. Outside, the rain had started again, soft against the roof. Inside, the world had gone still. Elena felt the heat of his body through his shirt, the faint tremor in his muscles where pain met restraint. Without thinking, her fingers brushed his wrist. He caught her hand, gently, but firmly. "Elena," he said. Just her name. No orders, no threats. The sound of it in his voice made her chest tighten. She should have pulled away. She didn't. Instead, she whispered, "You don't have to pretend to be made of stone all the time. And you don't have to pretend you don't care," he said quietly. That broke the air between them like lightning. For one suspended heartbeat, they were just two people caught in a storm that neither of them had chosen. Then, without words, he leaned forward, not quite a kiss, but close enough that she felt his breath against her skin. It wasn't passion. It was surrender. He stopped first, stepping back like a man pulling himself from the edge of a cliff. "I can't," he said, voice low and rough. "Not while you're still here because of obligation." She nodded, though part of her wanted to scream. "And what if it's not obligation?" He looked at her then, eyes burning with something too complex to name. "Then we'll deal with that when we can afford to." A guard appeared in the doorway, breaking the moment. "Boss, perimeter's clear." Mutiro turned away. "Good. Get the wounded to the east wing." Elena stood still, trying to steady her breathing. She felt like she just walked to the edge of a cliff and looked down at everything she'd been afraid to feel. As Mutiro left to command his men, she stayed behind, staring at the spot where he'd stood. Her pulse still thundered. The fear she'd once felt for him had transformed into something new, something far more dangerous: understanding. That night, when she finally closed her eyes, she dreamt not of running, not of war, but of his hand catching hers, firm, steady, and unwilling to let her fall. Morning came wrapped in smoke. The attack had left the mansion scarred, burn marks along the north wall, shattered glass, the acrid smell of gunpowder still hanging in the air. Mutiro's people moved with military precision, clearing debris, replacing doors, washing away blood. Life inside resumed, though every sound carried the echo of gunfire. Elena spent the first hours after sunrise tending to the injured guards. Her hands, trained for animal wounds, moved automatically over human skin. She stitched, cleaned, and bandaged while the men stared at her with a mixture of respect and unease. The boss's guest was no longer a rumor but a woman who saved lives with steady fingers. Mutiro stood silently by the doorway watching her work. He didn't interrupt, just watched, an unreadable expression on his face. When she finished the last bandage, he stepped forward and handed her a glass of water. "You're better at this than most of my medics," he said. She wiped her hands on a towel. "Years of practice. A knife wound's not so different from a jaguar's bite." He gave a short laugh that sounded almost real. "Except the jaguar doesn't shoot back." "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "But both attack when they smell fear." That silenced him. 2 nights later the unease returned. Mutiro's men had doubled the guards, but someone still managed to cut the power at midnight. The generators kicked in after 20 seconds, yet those 20 seconds stretched long enough for a single gunshot to echo from the kitchen corridor. Mutiro was already moving when the lights came back. "Stay here," he ordered Elena, reaching for his pistol. "Not a chance," she said, grabbing a flashlight. "Elena. You'll waste time arguing," she said sharply. "Let's go." He didn't argue again. They moved together through the narrow hallway, light beams slicing through the dark. The smell of burned oil filled the air. When they reached the kitchen, one of the younger guards lay slumped against the wall, blood blooming across his chest. His lips moved soundlessly. Elena dropped to her knees beside him. He's still breathing. "Don't," Mutiro warned. "It could be a trap." She ignored him, pressing her hand to the wound. "Call for help." The boy's fingers clutched at her wrist. "Inside," he gasped. "Inside the house." Then his eyes rolled back, the words dying on his tongue. Mutiro crouched beside her, scanning the shadows. He said, "Inside." "That means someone here is feeding them information." Elena looked up at him. "You think you have a spy?" "I don't think." "I know." By morning, the mansion's calm had turned to paranoia. Every servant, every guard was questioned. Matero's lieutenant, a lean man named Nico, brought in lists of names and shift times. Elena watched the interrogation from the library doorway. She saw the way Mateo handled it, no shouting, no threats, just that low, steady tone that made men sweat more than violence ever could. He demanded loyalty like other men demanded air. When the last guard left, Mateo turned to her. "You were in the clinic. You saw who came and went. If the Krasnovs planted someone in my house, it could be a link to that operation. You think it's someone connected to the clinic? It's possible. Their reach is longer than we guessed." Elena frowned. "Let me see the supply logs." He blinked. "Why?" "Because whoever's sabotaging you needs access to shipments, food, fuel, medical supplies. I know how to read that kind of paperwork." He studied her for a moment, then handed her the ledger. "Fine. But don't leave this room." For 3 hours she pored over numbers and signatures, cross-checking deliveries against the medical supplies she'd seen used after the attack. Something didn't fit. A shipment of antibiotics had been signed for twice, once by the house physician, once by a kitchen hand named Jaro. Elena flipped through more pages, her pulse quickening. Jaro's signature appeared again on fuel receipts, cleaning agents, even pantry deliveries. He handled everything that went in or out of the storage cellar. She went to find Mateo. He was in the courtyard, talking to Nico. "It's Jaro," she said without preamble. "He's been signing supply forms that don't make sense. You're being fed fake inventory data." Nico swore under his breath. "I'll bring him in." But before Mateo could answer, a crash echoed from the kitchen. They ran. By the time they reached it, Jaro was gone, back door swinging open, a trail of blood leading into the rain. "He's injured," Elena said. "He can't have gone far." Mateo's eyes narrowed. "Stay here." She grabbed his arm. "If he escapes, he'll lead them straight here." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay behind me." They followed the trail through the courtyard into the forest. Rain soaked them both. Lightning flashed, revealing a figure stumbling ahead. Mateo raised his gun, but Elena caught his wrist. "He's bleeding out, don't kill him." Jaro turned at the sound, eyes wild. "They have my family," he shouted. "They said they'd kill them if I didn't send reports." Mateo stepped closer. "Who has them?" "The Krasnovs." I didn't mean to." A shot cracked through the night. Jaro stiffened and fell forward, dead before he hit the ground. Elena gasped. Mateo spun, firing twice into the trees. The answering muzzle flash came from a hillside, then vanished. Whoever had silenced Jaro was already gone. When the echoes died, rain was the only sound. Elena knelt beside the body, trembling. They killed him to keep him quiet. Mateo holstered his gun. "And to send a message." "What message?" "That they're closer than we think." He looked at her then, water dripping from his hair, the fire of rage barely held behind his calm. "No more hiding," he said. "Tomorrow we strike back." That night the mansion was sealed under lockdown. Mateo met with his men in the war room, outlining routes and backup plans. Elena sat in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She was pale, eyes dark from exhaustion. The life she'd known before, the clean world of sterile clinics and quiet mornings, felt like it had belonged to another person. When a soft knock came at her door, she expected a guard. Instead, Mateo stood there, shirt damp from the rain. "You shouldn't be awake," he said. "I couldn't sleep." He hesitated, then stepped inside. "Neither could I." For a moment neither spoke. The storm had moved inland, leaving the air heavy and still. "Thank you," he said finally, "for finding the leak. Without you, we'd have never known." "You lost a man anyway," she said quietly. Mateo's expression tightened. "I lose people every week. Doesn't mean it stops hurting." She looked up at him. "You pretend you're made of iron, but you bleed like everyone else." "Maybe that's why I keep fighting," he said. "To make sure it means something." He turned to go, but she caught his hand. "Be careful tomorrow." For a heartbeat he looked like he wanted to say something, then simply nodded. "Always." When he left, the door closed softly behind him, but the warmth of his hand lingered against her skin long after. The next morning dawned cold and bright. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Mateo had already left with his men to secure an off-site meeting point, but before he went he left instructions for Elena, a car, 2 guards, and a trip to the private clinic for an ultrasound. At first she refused, too risky, too exposed, but Mateo's note had ended with "I promised I'd protect both of you. Let me keep that promise." So she went. The clinic was hidden in a quiet coastal town under a false name. Inside, everything smelled of disinfectant and lavender. Dr. Luciana, the same gentle woman who had visited the mansion, greeted her with a smile. "You're early," she said. "Good sign." Elena lay on the table, heart pounding as the machine hummed to life. The monitor flickered, static giving way to grey ripples of sound. Then, there it was, a small rhythmic pulse, steady and sure. Thump thump. Thump thump. The doctor smiled. "You're nearly 12 weeks now. Perfect growth. Strong heartbeat." Elena stared at the image on the screen. It was tiny, but alive, undeniably alive. For the first time since the wedding she felt the strange, quiet awe of creation. The chaos, the violence, the lies, none of it touched this heartbeat. It belonged to something innocent. She felt tears sting her eyes. "You're real," she whispered. A familiar voice answered from the doorway. "Of course they are." She looked up sharply. Mateo stood there, still wearing the dust of travel, eyes fixed on the monitor. He'd come straight from his operation to be there. Without a word, he stepped closer, stopping beside her. The doctor handed him a printout of the ultrasound, then quietly excused herself. They were alone. Mateo's hand rested lightly against her shoulder as they both watched the faint heartbeat flicker across the screen. "I've seen men die and cities burn," he said softly. "But I've never seen anything as strong as that." Elena turned her head to look at him. "You sound surprised." "I am," he admitted. "I didn't think I was capable of wanting something like this." She studied him. "You mean a family?" He gave a small, almost embarrassed nod. "Something worth protecting without guilt." The room fell quiet except for the steady rhythm of the machine. Then, almost without thinking, she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. His fingers curled around hers, rough and warm. For the first time, the contact didn't feel forced. It felt inevitable. Later, as they drove back, the car wound along the cliffs overlooking the sea. The sunlight glinted off the water in silver shards. Mateo sat beside her, silent but relaxed for once. "What happens now?" she asked. "We move," he said. "The Krasnovs will retaliate after last night. I have safe houses. You'll come with me." "You mean hide again?" "For a while," he said. "Then we finish it." Elena turned to the window. "You talk like this war will end cleanly. But wars don't end. They just change shape." He glanced at her. "Then we'll reshape it to our advantage." She smiled faintly. "You really think you can control everything?" He didn't answer, but the curve of his mouth told her he'd heard. When the car finally pulled into the new estate, a modern, glass-walled villa hidden deep in pine woods, Mateo stepped out first and offered her his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Inside, the house was quiet, almost peaceful. He led her to a wide living room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The air smelled of cedar and fresh paint. "This place feels different," she said. "It's safer," he replied. "And I thought you might like sunlight." "You thought of that?" "I think of many things," he said. "Most of them are you." She laughed softly. "That's dangerous." He met her gaze. "So is everything worth doing." That night, Elena sat on the terrace wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Mateo joined her, 2 glasses of warm milk in hand. "Doctor's orders," he said, smiling faintly. She accepted the glass. "You followed them?" "I can be taught." They sat in silence for a while. Crickets chirped. The forest whispered. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled. Finally, Elena said, "When I heard the heartbeat today, everything changed. I thought I hated this child for trapping me in your world. But now." Mateo looked at her. Now I'm terrified of losing it." He set his glass down, his voice low. You won't. Not while I breathe. Something in the way he said it, steady, almost solemn, made her believe him. For the first time since her world had exploded, Elena felt a fragile thread of peace. She leaned back, eyes half closed, and whispered, maybe you were right about control. How so? Maybe it's not about having it. Maybe it's about knowing when to share it. Matero's smile was slow, almost tender. Then tonight, we share it. And for a brief, quiet moment under the vast indifferent stars, the war outside their walls felt like it belonged to another universe. All that remained was a heartbeat, two people bound by it, and the thin, shining hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something stronger than fear. The peace lasted barely a week. It ended the moment Elena saw a face she'd thought she'd left behind forever, Ethan's. It was early afternoon. The sun cut through the pine branches outside the new villa, laying sharp lines of light across the marble floors. Matero was away meeting his lieutenants, and for once, the air felt almost normal. Elena had stepped outside to the garden, inhaling the clean scent of wet grass, when a voice called softly behind her. Elena. Her body went cold before her mind caught up. She turned slowly, and there he was, Ethan, her ex-fiancé, standing by the garden gate in the same pressed shirt and nervous smile she remembered from the wedding. What, how, her voice faltered. How did you find me? He stepped forward quickly, hands raised. Don't be scared. I just needed to see you. I've been trying to reach you for months. Ethan, she whispered, backing away. You shouldn't be here. I know what's going on, he said, eyes darting nervously toward the house. That man, DeLuca, he's dangerous. You need to come with me right now. Elena's pulse raced. You don't understand. I do, he interrupted, his voice cracking. They came to me after the wedding, the men who attacked. They told me what DeLuca is. They said he stole you. I thought you were dead. She stared at him, heart pounding. You talked to them? They found me. Ethan said quickly. They said they just wanted you back safely. I gave them your parents' number, the clinic records, everything. I didn't know. Her stomach dropped. You gave them my medical records? He blinked, confusion flickering into guilt. They said it would help prove your innocence. Elena, I was trying to help. The sound that escaped her was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Help. You handed them everything they needed to find me. Ethan's face went pale. What do you mean? A voice cut through the air like a blade. She means you've been feeding our enemies. Matero stepped out from behind the cypress trees, gun drawn, his men fanning out silently behind him. His expression was unreadable, calm in the way a storm is calm before it breaks. Ethan froze. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Matero said coldly. Men like you never do. You think your guilt is an excuse for stupidity. Elena ran forward, grabbing Mateo's arm. Don't. He didn't mean to, he didn't understand what he was doing. Mateo didn't look at her. Ignorance kills people, Elena. It's killed 3 of mine already. Please, she said, her voice trembling. He's not part of this world. He doesn't belong here. Finally, Mateo turned his eyes on her. Neither did you, he said quietly. And yet here you are. The words struck deep. He lowered the gun slowly but didn't holster it. Take him inside, he ordered his men. Ethan tried to protest but was silenced by the sharp click of a safety being released. Matero followed them in, his expression dark. The interrogation was brief. Matero didn't torture Ethan, didn't even raise his voice. He simply looked at him until the man broke. I swear, I didn't know. Ethan sobbed. They said they'd let me see her again, that they just wanted her safe. Matero's tone was quiet, almost conversational. What did you give them? Ethan swallowed. Her medical records, the clinic's donor data, her schedule before the wedding. They said it was just for confirmation. Confirmation that she was pregnant with my child, Matero finished. And that the clinic still had copies of my genetic records. Congratulations, Ethan. You've just confirmed their next target. Elena stood in the corner, trembling. What are you going to do with him? Matero's gaze flicked to her. That depends. On whether you still think he's worth saving. Her throat closed. You can't ask me that. Yes, I can, Matteo said evenly. Because the only reason he's alive right now is because of you. Ethan turned toward her, tears streaking his face. Elena, please help me. I made a mistake. She wanted to hate him, wanted to scream that he'd ruined everything, but all she saw was the man who once promised her safety and ended up being the reason danger found her. Lock him up, Matteo ordered finally. No harm. Not yet. When the guards dragged Ethan away, Elena stayed frozen in place. Matteo turned to her, his expression unreadable. You care about him. I did, she said. Before he handed my life to your enemies. He's not your past anymore, Matteo said. He's their pawn. Her voice broke. You're wrong. He's just a coward. Matteo studied her, then said softly, cowards are the easiest to use. That night, Matteo found her sitting on the terrace, staring into the dark forest. I didn't tell you to stay away from him because I enjoy control, he said quietly. I told you because mercy gets people killed in my world. Elena's eyes flashed. Maybe your world needs mercy. He exhaled. Maybe. But it doesn't deserve it. When she didn't answer, he came closer, stopping a few feet away. I know you think I'm a monster. Sometimes I agree with you. But I need you to believe one thing. I will not let them take you. Whatever it costs. She looked up at him, voice trembling. And what if the cost is you? For once, he had no answer. The next morning, Ethan was gone. The guards found his cell door open, one man unconscious beside it. A car missing. Tire tracks leading into the woods. Matteo's fury was silent but lethal. He had help, he said. Someone inside again. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. If he runs to them, he'll lead them straight here, Matteo finished. Then the real war begins. The attack came at dusk 2 days later. It started with the low hum of engines outside the gates, then the distant echo of gunfire. Within seconds, the villa turned into a fortress. Guards sprinted to positions, alarms blared, and Matteo barked orders into his radio. Elena was in the study, hands pressed to her belly, trying to breathe. Matteo burst in, gun strapped to his side, eyes blazing. They've found us. You stay here until I call. I'm not hiding again, she said. He moved close, voice firm. You're pregnant. You stay alive. That's an order. Before she could argue, the sound of glass shattering upstairs cut through the air. A grenade rolled across the floor. Matteo grabbed her and threw her behind the desk as it exploded. The blast shook the room, spraying shards of glass and fire. Move, he shouted, dragging her through the smoke. They stumbled into the hall as gunfire erupted outside. Matteo's men returned fire from the balconies, shouting in Italian. Elena could barely hear over the chaos. Matteo, she cried. You're outnumbered. Not for long. He pulled her toward the basement, where a reinforced room waited. But as they reached the stairwell, a figure appeared in the smoke. Ethan. He was pale, trembling, a gun shaking in his hands. Ethan? Elena gasped. What are you doing? I didn't want this, he said. They said they'd kill me if I didn't help them get inside. Put the gun down, Matteo said, voice cold as steel. Ethan's hand trembled. You don't understand, they're already here. A bullet whizzed past his shoulder, grazing him. He screamed and dropped the weapon. Matteo fired twice toward the source, hitting a man who fell hard to the marble floor. Go. Matteo shouted at Elena. Downstairs, now. But she didn't move. He's bleeding. He made his choice, Matteo snapped. She glared at him, defiant even through fear. So did I. Ignoring his shout, she ran to Ethan's side, tearing a strip from her sleeve to press against the wound. You're going to be okay, she said, voice shaking. He looked up at her, tears mixing with blood. I didn't mean to betray you. I thought I could fix it. Matteo crouched beside them, still scanning for threats. You can't fix what's already broken. The firefight outside intensified. Matteo's men yelled as bullets shattered windows. Then, from somewhere near the main gate, an explosion rocked the ground. The walls shuddered, plaster raining down. Matteo grabbed Elena's arm. We have to move. Now. Ethan's hand caught hers weakly. I'm sorry, he whispered. Elena's throat tightened. I know. Matteo pulled her toward the stairs. They half ran, half fell into the basement as another explosion shook the villa above. The air was thick with dust and gunpowder. In the safe room, Matteo slammed the door and keyed in the lock. His men outside continued to fight, but their voices were growing fewer. Elena leaned against the wall, shaking. This is madness. It's war, Matteo said grimly. He reloaded his weapon with practiced calm. And war doesn't stop for grief. Outside, gunfire faded to silence. For a moment, only the drip of leaking pipes broke the quiet. Then came 3 sharp knocks on the metal door. Matteo froze. That's not our signal. Before he could react, the door burst open, one of his own men standing there, blooded and desperate. They're retreating, he gasped. The Krasnovs pulled back. Matteo frowned. Why? Something spooked them, the man said. Their leader's dead. Someone hit them from behind. Matteo blinked. What? Snipers. Precise. Professional. Not ours. Elena's heart pounded. Then who? Matteo holstered his gun slowly. Someone else wants this war finished. When dawn came, the villa was half in ruins. Smoke curled into the morning air, carrying the stench of blood and gunpowder. Matteo's men gathered bodies quietly, their faces grim. Ethan hadn't survived the night. His wound had been worse than anyone realized. Matteo found Elena kneeling beside him as the first light touched the floor. She wasn't crying. Her expression was blank, too empty even for grief. He was weak, Matteo said gently. But not evil. He was my past, she whispered. And he died trying to fix it. Matteo crouched beside her. And now he's gone. Which means we move forward. She looked up at him, eyes shining with exhaustion and something like resolve. Then we finish it. No more running. His jaw tightened, a slow nod forming. No more running. That evening, as the sun bled red across the shattered glass of the villa, Matteo stood beside Elena on the terrace overlooking the sea. What happens now? She asked quietly. We rebuild, he said. And then we strike back. Elena stared at the horizon, the waves crashing below. You can't keep fighting forever. He looked at her, his voice low. I can until the world stops taking what's mine. She met his gaze steadily. Then let me help. Not as your captive. As your partner. For a long moment, Matteo didn't move. Then, slowly, he took her hand. The war had taken her home, her innocence, her past, but it had also given her purpose. And as the last light faded from the sea, she knew there was no turning back. Together, they would bring the storm. The war changed after Ethan's death. Matteo's enemies had fractured, half the Krasnov family retreating underground, the rest scattering into rival gangs, but the threat wasn't gone. It had simply gone silent. And silence, Elena quickly learned, was more dangerous than open fire. 4 days, Matteo stayed locked in his office with maps and encrypted calls. The air in the villa was thick with tension. Guards came and went in quiet patterns, and Elena watched them all with wary eyes. She couldn't sleep anymore. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. Every time Matteo's phone rang, her heart jumped. One morning, she walked into the study to find him staring at a surveillance photo, a man in a grey suit, stepping off a private jet. Who is he? She asked. Matteo didn't look up. Agron Krasnov. The head of the family. The one who ordered your kidnapping. Elena's stomach turned. You're sure? He's coming to Milan, Matteo said. To negotiate with foreign investors, people who buy weapons, information, and blood. Then you'll go after him. Matteo finally looked at her. We'll go after him. Her heart skipped. What do you mean, we? He turned the photo toward her. You're the one person he won't suspect. You can walk into that event without anyone blinking. The doctor, the fiancé, the woman everyone thought was a victim. They'll never see you as a threat. Elena stared at him. You want me to be bait? He nodded once. He needs to see you. When he does, we'll know where he is. And I'll finish it. Her pulse quickened. You're asking me to stand in a room with the man who tried to have me killed. I'm asking you to help end this. She wanted to refuse, to scream that she wasn't built for this world of violence and vengeance, but deep inside, she knew something had shifted in her long ago. She wasn't just the terrified bride anymore. She was part of the fight now. What kind of event is it? She asked quietly. Matero handed her an invitation printed on thick, expensive cardstock. A charity gala. Tomorrow night. The city's elite, international investors, government eyes pretending not to see what's in front of them. Her eyes scanned the gold lettering. The Oceanic Grand Ballroom. He nodded. You'll be accompanied by my team. I'll be nearby. And when you find him? Matero's voice was calm, but the darkness in it was absolute. I'll end him. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Elena was fitted for a gown midnight blue silk that fell like water, chosen not for beauty but for movement. Hidden beneath the folds of fabric was a tracking device and a small transmitter disguised as a brooch. Matero gave her a small earpiece. I'll hear everything, he said. Comforting, she said dryly. He almost smiled. It should be. Before they left, he stopped her in the corridor. Elena, he said quietly. Once you step into that room, everything changes. You understand that? She nodded. I stopped being the same person a long time ago. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable passing between them, then offered his arm. Let's finish this. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and laughter. Music drifted like perfume, smooth and elegant, masking the rot beneath. Elena stepped through the doors, her head held high, every step measured. She looked like she belonged, poised, graceful, untouchable. But inside, her heart thundered. Through her earpiece, Matero's voice was steady. You're clear. Walk toward the main bar. Agrants in the VIP section, talking to a group near the aquarium display. She did as he said, forcing herself not to look around. The scent of expensive cologne and champagne filled the air. She smiled when people greeted her, nodded when strangers complimented her dress. Each movement felt rehearsed, almost unreal. Then she saw him. Agron Krasnov, older than she expected, broad-shouldered, his smile too white, his presence too heavy. He was laughing with investors, but his eyes scanned the crowd like a predator's. Her breath hitched. I see him. Stay calm, Matero's voice murmured in her ear. He doesn't know you're here for him. Let him come to you. She turned to the bar, pretending to study the wine list. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Agrant's head tilt, recognition sparking. He said something to the man beside him, then started toward her. Her palms went slick. Easy, Matero whispered. You're doing fine. Agron stopped behind her. Forgive me, he said in a voice smooth and low, but you look familiar. Elena turned, schooling her expression into polite confusion. Do I? I never forget a face, he said, smiling. Especially one that caused so much trouble. Her stomach clenched. You're mistaken. Am I? He leaned closer. You disappeared after the Valentisi wedding fiasco. Quite the scandal. I heard whispers that you were taken. Elena forced a brittle laugh. People love gossip. Agrant's smile widened, shark-like. Some gossip is worth listening to. Especially when it involves powerful men and stolen brides. Before she could respond, Matero's voice came sharply through the earpiece. He knows. Keep him talking. She steadied herself. You seem to know a lot about other people's business, Mr. Krasnov, he said proudly. Agron Krasnov. She pretended surprise. Ah, the philanthropist. I've heard your name. He chuckled. Philanthropy is just a hobby. I deal in other trades. I'm sure you do, she said. Agron raised his glass. You're braver than I expected. Walking freely when so many want you dead. I'm not afraid of ghosts, she said evenly. For the first time, his smile faded. You should be. Then Matero's voice came again. Now, Elena. Step back. We have him. Before Agron could react, the ballroom lights flickered. The orchestra stopped mid-note. A small explosion echoed from the rear entrance, Matero's men moving in. Panic erupted. Guests screamed and ran for the exits. Agron reached for a gun beneath his jacket, but Matteo was already there, emerging from the smoke like a shadow. "Game's over," Matteo said. Agron turned, sneering. "Valentisi. You should have stayed in your hole." "I prefer ending wars face to face," Matteo said. They circled each other in the chaos, two predators locked in the same orbit. "You think killing me changes anything?" Agron said. "You'll just take my place in the dirt." "Maybe," Matteo said. "But at least I'll sleep better." He fired once. The sound was deafening, swallowed by the screams and alarms. Agron staggered back, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. His glass shattered to the floor. Elena froze, heart hammering. Matteo lowered the gun. "It's done." He turned to her, but before he could speak, a second shot rang out. Matteo's body jerked, his hand flying to his side. "Matteo," she screamed. One of Agron's men, bleeding but alive, had fired from behind a fallen table. Matteo collapsed to one knee, gritting his teeth. Elena snatched the gun from his belt and fired the shot clean, straight. The man fell instantly. Silence fell. The smoke, the panic, the smell of gunpowder, it all felt unreal. "Matteo," she whispered, kneeling beside him. He looked up, eyes hazy but alive. "You shoot well." She laughed through her tears. "Don't talk. Remind me," he murmured, "never to underestimate you again." They escaped before the police arrived, Matteo half conscious in the car, blood seeping through his shirt. "Stay with me," Elena kept saying as she pressed her hand against the wound. He gave a weak grin. "You saved me." "You've done enough saving for both of us," she said. "Maybe," he whispered. "But this time, you finished it." Hours later, the safe house smelled of antiseptic and rain. Matteo lay on a couch, pale but alive, stitches running across his side. Elena sat beside him, exhausted but steady. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "And let you die in a ballroom," she shot back. "You're welcome." He smiled faintly. "You sound like me now. I'm starting to see why your men follow you," she said. "You make people believe they're unstoppable. Even you." She hesitated. "Maybe." The silence between them softened. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. "You realize," Matteo said, voice rough, "you just took down one of the biggest crime bosses in Europe." She exhaled. "You make it sound heroic." "It was survival," he said. He reached for her hand, slow, tentative, and she didn't pull away. "When I first met you," he said, "I thought of you as a burden. A problem to solve. But now," he paused, searching for words. "Now I think maybe you were the only thing that kept me from becoming what they wanted me to be." Her throat tightened. "And what was that?" "A monster." "You're not," she said quietly. "Not anymore." Matteo smiled faintly. "That's because of you." She shook her head. "No. Because you chose to stop." He closed his eyes, the faintest sigh escaping. "Maybe we both did." Days passed. News of Agron Krasnov's death spread like wildfire across the underworld. The police called it a terrorist assassination, but everyone who mattered knew the truth. The balance of power had shifted. Matteo's name was now legend, the man who took down Krasnov himself. But inside the safe house, none of that mattered. Elena spent her days tending to him, changing his dressings, making sure he ate. Each touch, each word, carried the weight of everything they'd endured. One night, as the rain tapped softly against the windows, Matteo stirred awake to find her dozing beside him. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering. She woke, blinking. "You should be resting." "I am," he murmured. "Just not the way you think." She smiled sleepily. "You're impossible. Only with you." For a while, neither spoke. The storm outside faded into silence. Then Matteo said softly, "When this all began, I thought I was saving you from my enemies. But maybe you were saving me from myself." Elena turned toward him, her hand finding his. "Then we saved each other." He smiled. "Equal terms." The words hung between them like a vow. By midnight, the rain had stopped. The world outside was quiet, too quiet. Elena stood by the window, watching the fog curl along the road. Somewhere in that stillness, she knew, the future waited, fragile, uncertain, but theirs to claim. Behind her, Mateo's voice broke the silence. "You're not afraid anymore." She looked back at him. "I'm still afraid. I've just stopped letting it control me." "That's the difference between survivors and victims," he said. "And which are we?" He smiled faintly. "Both." Elena crossed the room, kneeling beside him. "Then maybe it's time we start living like people again." He brushed his fingers along her cheek, the gesture gentle, almost reverent. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said softly. "But we've already done the hard part, staying alive." He looked at her for a long moment. "Elena Carter," he said quietly, "whatever comes next, you choose it. No more cages. Not mine, not theirs." "I already have," she whispered. And for the first time, when he leaned toward her, she didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't think. Their lips met, soft, certain, sealing not a rescue, but a partnership forged in blood and fire. Outside, the sky cleared, revealing a pale slice of moonlight over the wreckage of the war they had survived. Inside, two survivors finally allowed themselves to breathe. Morning came softly. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and glittering under a cold dawn. Mateo sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, a half-empty mug of coffee beside him, staring out at the skyline. For the first time in years, there were no urgent calls, no gunfire, no men standing guard at the door. Elena stepped out quietly, a shawl around her shoulders. Her hair caught the wind, glowing gold in the light. She paused, studying him. The strong, controlled man she'd met months ago looked different now, still dangerous, still powerful, but human. "Can I join you?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "You already did." She sat beside him. For a long while they said nothing. The silence between them wasn't tense anymore. It was full, lived in, like a shared secret. "How's the wound?" she asked finally. "Healing." He glanced at her. "You did a better job than most of my doctors." She smiled. "I've had plenty of practice patching up reckless creatures." He chuckled. "You mean me? If the shoe fits." He turned serious then, eyes fixed on the city below. "It feels strange," he said quietly. "No gunfire, no orders, no enemies at the gate." "Strange is good," she said. "For men like me, peace feels like a trap." "Then maybe it's time you learned how to live in one." He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "You think I can?" "I think you already started," she said. Later that afternoon, they drove to the coast. Mateo's men followed at a distance, but he dismissed most of them, a small act of rebellion against his own paranoia. The sea stretched endless and blue before them. Elena walked barefoot along the shore, the wind tugging at her dress. Mateo followed behind, watching her with a faint smile. "You used to hate the ocean," she said, glancing back. "I hated what it reminded me of," he said. "My father used to bring me here." Said salt water washed away blood. She stopped, turning to him. "Did it?" He shook his head. "Not yet." She took his hand. "Then maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe it just reminds you there's more than blood." They stood there for a while, watching the waves. A gull cried overhead. For the first time in what felt like forever, Mateo's shoulders relaxed. That night, back at the villa, they ate dinner by candlelight. No guards, no meetings, no interruptions. Just the quiet rhythm of forks against plates and the crackle of a nearby fire. "I spoke to Luciana," Elena said between bites. "She says the baby's strong. We should think about names." He looked up, caught off guard. "Names?" "Yes." She smiled. "You know, the thing people call their children so they don't have to keep saying hey you." He laughed softly. "I never thought I'd live long enough to have that problem." "Well, you do now." He leaned back, watching her. "You choose." "No," she said, pointing her fork at him. "You start. Something Italian, something that means hope." He thought for a moment. "Vittoria, if it's a girl." "It means victory." Elena's smile softened. "And if it's a boy?" "Leonardo," he said. "For my father." "Then Vittoria or Leonardo it is." He nodded, a small but genuine smile curving his mouth. Thank you. For what? For reminding me there's a future. After dinner, he found her in the garden, sitting on the stone steps, gazing up at the stars. You ever wonder, she said quietly, what life would have been if we'd never met? Every day, he admitted. And he sat beside her. I'd still be alive, maybe. But I wouldn't be living. She turned her head toward him. That's the first romantic thing you've ever said. He smirked. Don't get used to it. She laughed softly. The sound was light, unguarded, a sound he realized he'd kill to protect. He reached out, fingers brushing hers. You changed everything, he said. So did you, she whispered. They sat there in the dark garden, their hands intertwined, two people who'd walked through fire and somehow found peace in its ashes. 3 months later, the child was born. A quiet hospital on the edge of Florence, no reporters, no guards, no one who knew their names. Elena's labor lasted through a thunderstorm, lightning flashing across the sky like a divine drumroll. Matteo never left her side. His hand was steady in hers, though his face betrayed every ounce of fear he refused to speak aloud. When the first cry filled the room, he felt something he hadn't known existed, a kind of fierce, wordless love that made everything else, all the wars and losses, feel small. It's a girl, the doctor said, smiling. Healthy and strong. Elena leaned back, tears in her eyes. Vittoria, she whispered. Matteo nodded, unable to speak. He took the tiny bundle from the nurse, staring down at the small face, perfect, pink, alive. The baby's fingers curled around his thumb, impossibly small but certain. In that moment, Matteo Valentisi, the man the world called a monster, felt his heart break open. She's beautiful, he said softly. She looks like you, Elena teased weakly. Poor child, he said, smiling. She laughed through her exhaustion. She's perfect. He leaned down, kissed her forehead. So are you. For 2 weeks, the world was still. No threats, no danger, only the rhythm of the baby's breathing, the sound of the sea beyond the villa walls. Matteo's men guarded the perimeter but gave them space. It felt almost like a real family. Elena would find Matteo in the nursery sometimes, standing over the crib, completely silent, his hand resting on the edge as if to make sure she was real. One night she found him there again, the moonlight silvering his face. You're awake again, she said gently. He didn't look up. She makes noises when she dreams. She's safe, Elena said. He nodded. I know. I just need to see it. She stepped closer, laying a hand on his arm. You can't protect her from everything. I can try, he said. And you will, she said softly. But she also needs you to live, Matteo. Not just survive. Live. He turned to her then, the hardness in his eyes breaking. I don't know how. Then we'll learn together. Weeks passed. Slowly, Matteo began to change. He met with his men less. He dismantled certain routes, cut ties with dangerous allies, sold off pieces of his empire. The underworld whispered that the Valentisi family was retreating, that its leader had gone soft. Matteo didn't care. For the first time, he had something worth losing. But peace never comes without a price. It began with a letter. No seal, no signature, just a single line written in precise handwriting. Your past doesn't disappear. It waits. Matteo read it once, then burned it. He told no one, not even Elena. But that night, he sat awake long after she'd fallen asleep, the words echoing like footsteps in an empty hall. He knew what it meant. There were still debts unpaid, enemies alive, and ghosts unwilling to rest. A week later, as the sun dipped low, he stood on the terrace holding Vittoria in his arms. The child giggled, tugging at his collar, her tiny eyes bright. Elena stood in the doorway watching, a soft smile on her lips. Do you ever think, she said, that this is what you were fighting for all along? He turned toward her. I think this is what I didn't know I needed. Then promise me something, she said. Anything. When the past comes knocking again, because it will, promise me you won't face it alone. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. I promise. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. And if you ever forget that promise, He smiled faintly. "You'll remind me." "I will," she said. That night, after she'd gone to bed, Matteo stood by the window watching the horizon. Somewhere beyond the hills, old allies were already moving, shifting, rebuilding the world he'd tried to destroy. He knew peace couldn't last forever. But for now, it was enough. He looked down at the sleeping child in the cradle beside him. "You'll never know what this world cost to make," he whispered. "And that's how it should be." Behind him, Elena stirred in her sleep. He turned, watched her for a moment, the woman who had once been a stranger, now the center of his universe. For the first time in years, Matteo smiled without bitterness. Days later, they left the city quietly. No one saw them go. They drove north toward the mountains, where the air was clean and the past couldn't follow so easily. In the back seat, Vittoria slept soundly. Elena leaned her head against Matteo's shoulder. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere with no phones, no guns, no lies," he said. "That place doesn't exist." He smiled. "Then we'll build it." The road curved upward, sunlight filtering through the trees. The air smelled of pine and promise. For the first time, neither of them looked back. Weeks later, news would spread through the underground of Matteo Valentisi's disappearance, the ghost of a legend who walked away from his throne and was never seen again. Some said he died. Others said he built a new empire in the shadows. But those who truly knew him, the few who'd seen the look in his eyes when he held his child, understood the truth. He had simply chosen peace. Years later, a small town in the hills of northern Italy would know a quiet veterinarian named Elena and her husband, a man who rarely spoke of his past. Their daughter would grow up chasing the same sunlight that had once broken through the storm. And sometimes, when the wind was right, the man who used to be Matteo Valentisi would stand on the porch, looking toward the sea, and whisper, "Vittoria." Victory. Because somehow, against every law of his world, they had won. Every ending is just the start of another storm. If you felt the fire, the love, and the danger in this story, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and step back into a world where loyalty cuts deeper than bullets and love defies every rule.